breakfast. It's Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk with Matthew Dickinson.
No, it's not Friday. It's not Friday, but I wanted to talk to Matty Dickinson about the rain and about communications. How does the flood water affect communications? As you could hear, Katrina Humphrey's mobile was pretty well clear as, but that's not the only problem for communications during floods, is it, man?
No, and it's certainly gotten much better. Mobile phones are pretty good during flood times because we're relying on...
I reckon the weather it is, the clearer it is.
Well, probably, yeah. But they're relying on wireless communications.
Yes.
Everyone's got the story they know from many years ago when we were all relying on copper to our houses or even to farmland. You get some rain, there'd be a bit of water going down to a pit, and copper being close together, a little bit of water in there, then two copper wires just shorted out, and that's when you'd get all that crackle and you'd get calls dropping in and out in that crackle. There are some people still, not many, but still with copper, and they still get some of these problems when the rain comes. But the good part is landlines now mostly are fed by fibre with the rollout of the NBN, so they're all okay because A, it's fibre, it doesn't have that same short out problem, but B, they're all a bunch of new connections because some of the copper that we've got out there is maybe 100 years old, so it's been in the ground or in these connections for 100 years. It can start to actually get to the point where the connections aren't perfect, a little bit of moisture in there goes your connection.
Now, if you get into flood and it's up to your gadget on the outside of your house, there's trouble, isn't there?
Exactly right. If your house was actually being flooded and you had, for example, an NBN box on the outside of your house, what's called an NTD, and water got to that might be a bit of a problem. But still, fibre is better able to cope with water than copper because you're not shorting out connections with fibre. And so you could actually have a fibre connection underwater and still being okay, again, as long as those connections were done properly.
Okay, and that goes underground to get to your house.
It goes underground.
Is that a problem?
No, not at all. And again, hopefully, when they're doing all the new connections, if you actually have a look at a fibre NBN connection, you'll see two fibre cables, which are very small, but the connection between them is a fairly large device that actually they first of all join the cable, but then there's a connection that goes over the top of that to make it fully waterproof. So theoretically, it could be underwater. Now, jump forward another 100 years, maybe some of those bits of plastic have broken down, but at the moment, it should be able to cope with it.
Okay, and if you've got the connection inside your bedroom, inside your living room, there shouldn't be any problem, should there?
No, that's right. Again,
don't open it and use a vacuum cleaner to blow it dry if it's got wet?
No, that's right. But it shouldn't be, unless your house is underwater. Hopefully, houses are out of that. But again, we're using more and more mobile communications now, so we're relying on the telecommunication carriers to make sure that their towers, which are typically in higher places, so they're on hills rather than in valleys, so they're typically up higher, and we're relying on them to keep the base component of that dry because obviously that's where all the communication equipment is. But the tower itself is sending out that signal wirelessly. You're at the other end with your phone wirelessly. So hopefully those communications, like we heard with Katrina, are pretty good quality.
It's come down pretty heavy at times, hasn't it, Matt?
Absolutely.
Pretty heavy, and the gutters are overflowing. What about your dish on the roof? No problem?
So if you've got a dish on the roof and you're actually in the rain as such, then yeah, it can have an issue because...
What sort of issue?
Well, just losing connection because water is actually a really good absorber of electromagnetic signal. So if you've got rain that heavy that it's actually having trouble getting from a satellite to a dish on your roof, if it's got to go through a lot of water, i.e. rain, then that can actually absorb some of that signal. One of the reasons we actually get a real problem when we go into wooded areas with our mobile phones, eucalypts in Australia, we see lots of eucalypts. They've got a lot of moisture within the tree itself. So
eucalyptus trees.
Eucalyptus trees, for example.
Koalas want eucalyptus.
That's right. But it's not so much the wood that blocks our signal when we go into a wooded area. It's the moisture inside the tree that's mainly blocking our signal. So water is something that really has an impact on wireless signals.
That it's justified to mow down the eucalyptus forest.
I'm not saying that at all, Richard. I would never say that. I'm just saying, understanding when you go into those wooded areas, it's not the wood that's blocking your signal.
Camping,
if you're going camping, it's the moisture within those trees that's blocking your signal. So water, my point there is water is a very good blocker of electromagnetic signals.
Goodness me, poor old koalas.
Yeah, their mobile phone reception doesn't go that well.
That'd be a good ad, wouldn't it?
It would be.
We should get Telstra on to have mobile phones and koalas talking to each other. There's a great little an ad for NRMA on at the moment too, with a kid who lets a koala free and runs up the trees. That digresses as well.
Yes.
So it shouldn't be too bad. I mean, it should get through this rain.
Exactly right. Yeah, we should be able to keep communicating within the rain, which is important because we need to be able to communicate while we've got emergencies, disasters.
It's putting it to the test, isn't it?
Absolutely right.
Because they ripped out our handsets, our phones at home. We couldn't have them. Now we've got to rely on the communication. And talking great distances, does that have any impact in longer distances, harder to get through the floods and rains?
Not only from where you are to the tower. So not really if I'm talking to someone in Perth or talking to someone around the corner, not a real difference except where I am from the tower. So if I'm close to a tower or a long way from a tower, that will make the difference.
Okay. So that should be okay. Contact your provider if something happens.
Yeah, absolutely right.
The other thing I wanted to grab you pretty quickly because it's away, we're October to go. With your tour to OROC, you've just announced the route,
Yes.
haven't you, for the pedal power, as I'm calling it.
Yep.
That's now in concrete, or
Pretty much, yeah. Once we decide the route, there's so much planning that goes into it. We've got to get police approvals. We've got to make sure we map out the route with a whole range of different authorities, with local authorities, local police authorities, but even just organising accommodation in those places overnight. So once we decide on the route, and it takes a lot of discussion to get the route sorted because every town wants us to come through their town and every town wants us to stay overnight. So you're juggling all these things to try and get it.
Oh, to be popular.
It is a good thing when we go through these different communities.
It's a fundraiser.
It's a
great.
fundraiser, that's right. But all those communities love being part of it as well. They really get in behind it. So we've got the route. We're starting in Mudgee. We've only been in Mudgee to start once before, back in 2017.
Okay.
Starting in Mudgee, going up to Armatry on the first night, then through to Walgett the second night, across to Burke, down to Cobar, into Warren, and then through to Dubbo at the end.
All right. And you want committee?
We've got a committee up and running now, so we've had our
You've
first
got one.
meeting.
Good.
Yep, fantastic group we've got there. If anyone wants to join, though, don't hesitate, still a part of it. And then we'll just start rolling out the requirement for some riders, for some sponsors. We've got some support crew, that sort of thing.
All right. Now, you had sponsors on jerseys a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so we broke
Can you still
another.
be a part of that?
Yeah, we
You
broke
broke a
another
world
Guinness
record,
World
didn't you?
Record. Yep, and so we've got to make the final decision on that, whether that's an appropriate thing to do again. It may well be, but I'll let the committee decide that. But certainly we want sponsors on board because you said it's a fundraiser. That's what it's all about, is raising money for Macquarie Homestay.
Yeah, great event. And you can have your sticker, your name on your
On the jersey, yeah. And it's interesting, the stats out of Macquarie Homestay, number one local government area for Macquarie Homestay is the Walgett Shire. Number two is Cobar. Number three is Mudgee.
I know, it's surprising.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting to see some of those areas that are using Macquarie Homestay, but that's fantastic to see that facility is used, in fact, overutilised. They're often booked out at the moment.
That's it too. Rod Crowfoot's a great hotel operator.
That's right.
Yes, now, if you want to be part of the OROC committee,
Yep.
you go on to
Just info@tourtooroc.bike.
.bike.
.bike.
Good, isn't it too? And if you have a problem with your provider, you could recycle your mobile.
Yeah, so mobile musters are...
Do you take it?
We do, absolutely.
You do?
Yeah, and it's something that's been going for a number of years now, because sometimes people open the bottom drawer in their desk and they've got the last 5 or 6 mobile phones they've had. They used to pass them, parents used to pass them down to their kids, but the kids want the latest models now, so they don't want the hand-me-down models anymore.
Well, I was talking to Spyro from Mobile Muster. He said actually after a year they value less, but you can trade them in.
Yeah, some
Do
providers...
you do it at Axel?
Yeah, we do in different circumstances allow them to trade them in. They hand them down. People put them on social media and sell them. But it does get to the point sometimes where it's just not worth anything. And so then most stores like ours have got a mobile muster box. You drop them in. When that fills up, we send them off to mobile muster, and then they get recycled. They get pulled apart and the components taken out of them.
And Spiro said to Tutti at breakfast a short time ago, Matty, that most of it's recyclable.
Yeah, most of the materials inside there, and because they're valuable materials, it's worth the time and effort to pull them apart and actually extract those various components.
The bit I liked about it was the fact that the aluminium could be melted down to make a sink. That's what I said anyway. He laughed too.
That'd be a lot of mobile phones to make a sink.
Mocking me like Spyro was. I don't know what happened.
Breakfast is Take Talk, Take Talk, Take Talk, Take Talk, Take Talk, Take Talk, Take Talk with Matthew Dickinson.
Someone unreason that makes me smile. I don't know about you, Matty Dickinson, to make you smile.
Every single
time.
week.
It's 828 on Tutti at breakfast. If you'd like to talk to Matty Dickinson, something problematic with your tech, or you're a bit concerned, give him a call, 1300 66 1251. Autonomous, meaning?
Well, full autonomous is the car, for example, is driving for you. It doesn't need a human involved.
I suppose the first time we got a taste of autonomy was the gearbox, wasn't it, in cars?
Automatic gearboxes, yeah, I suppose you're right. And there's certainly a number of things now. In fact, 30% of cars sold in the US last year had some form of autonomy, what's called level 2 autonomy. So they are things
Where's level 1?
Well, level 1 is probably some really basic things, but level 2 is when you start to get things like radar controlled braking. A car stops in front of you suddenly.
Police are using that now.
Yeah. Also lane assist. So when you'll be driving along and you start drifting outside your lane, not only do you get some noise go off or some beeping go off.
Can I jump in there, Manny? Does that work between Dubbo and Wellington?
It works fantastically where the lines are marked properly and
But
where
if
the
there
lines
aren't?
aren't. Yeah, so I played around
What
with.
happens if they're not, or they've remarked them and changing lanes? Sometimes they add a lane, or they do something to the street and they change the size of the lane or the direction. Now your car can get confused.
It can, and I actually did a test for you, knowing that we're going to talk about this morning. I went down Macquarie Street where they've been doing some road works,
Yeah.
and they've got bitumen over the white lines.
What do you do? The car goes
So
into the bush.
the car's going along straight, and when it detects no lines there, it then starts to shake the wheel, give you some warnings, and start to slow down in a straight line. So it works out that I don't know where I am, I don't know what's going on, I better just start slowing down and start warning the driver here that something's going wrong.
What happens if you've gone into a coma and you're sleeping?
Right.
Right, in an autonomous car, and you go past. This is really hypothetical, but it could happen, Matt. You go into roadworks on a country road, which have obliterated the lines, and you are asleep.
So if you don't do something in the current models of autonomous, if you don't do something with the steering wheel, so if you don't put some pressure on the steering wheel, let it know that you're still there awake, it will actually slow. It gives you lots of warnings and then slows down to a stop in a straight line.
Right.
Yeah. So if there's a corner there, that's a problem. But line markings have never.
Notice it just glibbed over that.
That's right.
If there's a corner there, there's a problem. But however,
It does put more pressure on our governments to
Yes.
keep roads in better conditions, in particular the white lines on the side of the road, because most of them now, people think they're using GPS, and there's some experiments with GPS, but the GPS is just not quite accurate enough to the millimetre compared to the white lines on the side of the road, cameras using those white lines to see where it is in relation to the rest of the road, which is great when you've got white lines on the road.
can I ask you, as a driver, have you got an autonomous vehicle?
I've got one that's got semi-autonomous driving, so it's not the... Tesla haven't got to the point where they've got full autonomous yet.
But they will.
They will. They will. And every
Why
manufacturer
do we
will.
need autonomous vehicles?
Safer. We'll save lives, Richard.
We're saving more now with not.
Absolutely.
autonomous
But we're saving more lives just having seatbelts, Richard. Just having
That's from the
airbags, having
early
ABS.
70s.
Yeah, the peak of road deaths in Australia was back in the late 60s. And when seatbelts
Okay.
were introduced, it started going down.
Fast forward 20 years, no deaths on the road.
Fantastic.
You reckon that's good?
I don't think we'll get there with zero deaths. I know Victoria aims towards zero deaths because there are so many other things that happen, but I think we can keep reducing it. And again, the main factor in car crashes now are you and I, humans.
Yeah.
So we get tired, we lose concentration, we get distracted. There are some silly ones amongst us, hopefully not people that we know, but that still get drunk or still have drugs. So there's other things, a whole range of things where a human factor comes into play. Kids in the back seat can be arguing. You turn around to say what's going on, you turn back in front of you, you've run off the road. So
you drop your VB and you look for it and you're in all sorts of trouble.
that's right. Now here's the really tricky part. The programmers writing the software have to make decisions. You and I make decisions when we're driving along. Oh no, we've lost control of the car. Oh, I could steer that way and I could maybe miss that person on the road, but then run into that car that's got 5 people in the car. Which way do I go? Now, we're probably not quick enough with our decision making to actually consciously make that decision. We're just trying to steer it and get it somewhere that...
I'm driving an autonomous Tesla.
Yep.
I'm driving down the road and a little old lady with her walker steps out.
So she steps out on the road and...
What does the car do?
The car's got to make a decision. The car's got to decide, I can't stop in time to not hit that lady, but I can swerve. But oh no, on the other side of the road...
There's another old lady coming from the other side.
Or there might be something that's a worse outcome. In other words, it might be a group of people. Or
a bus or something.
Or it might be, exactly as you said before, a pole. So it might be, oh, if I swerve that way, the driver will be injured. If I go straight ahead and plough through the little old lady, the driver's fine, but the little old lady, not so much. So the programs...
Decision by an autonomous vehicle to knock an old lady or hit a pole.
And this is the sort of thing, but it's not the decision by the autonomous vehicle, it's the decision by the people who write the software.
Right.
So then the little old lady gets knocked over, the family of the little old lady says, well, hold on, we want to sue someone here. The driver says, well, I was doing nothing, I had my arms folded, just taking in the scenery. Yeah, that's right. So then who do you sue? Do you sue the car manufacturer? Do you sue the guy who wrote the program? So this is a whole area that we just don't know. So many unknowns in this area at this stage.
Most of us, South, if we're smart enough, especially if we live in the bush, Matty Dickinson, comprehensive insurance.
Yeah.
That means there may be another paragraph, comprehensive plus.
Autonomous.
Autonomous.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing is people like to sue someone who's got the money to be sued. So that if you've got an Apple or a Tesla or a General Motors, they've got pretty deep pockets so that they can be sued in that scenario. You sue someone without insurance and they don't have much money behind them, obviously it's not a good outcome for you. So
that's getting on the delicate side of stuff and fine print, but I reckon eventually you won't be able to drive a car unless you have Comprehensive Plus.
And it may well be the case. I mean, the biggest problem for lawmakers, for our governments, is keeping up with the technology. That's always a challenge, to keep up with the technology that changes.
Yeah, and the whole thing is that the human is still needed, isn't it?
Well, the human is still, the whole idea of the car driving from point A to point B is normally that the human wants to get from point A to point B, but it might be, for example, transport logistics. You don't need a person during the travel. You only need someone to load up the vehicle at one end, for example, a truck, and then at the other end to be unloaded. So we see that already with mine sites. We've got autonomous vehicles on mine sites. They get loaded up with the ore at one end, and the other end it gets dumped into whatever that needs to be dumped into.
Well, the thing is, that's fairly mundane work, up and down, up and down.
Correct.
Up and down.
Yeah,
But
that's
when you've
right.
got to go around, imagine manipulating a car around Dubbo now.
That's right. Yeah, roundabouts, traffic,
Yeah.
traffic lights. Yeah.
What
So
are they like in roundabouts, autonomous vehicles?
yeah. Look, again, they're clever enough to know where to go, and the
Do
problem
they
is
know the road rules?
they know the road rules. They get the testing in terms of where they do the testing. They do it with all those conditions. There's something like 3 million miles that have been driven in fully autonomous mode by cars in America. There's some states where it's legal for these cars to be tested. So we've got cars out there driving now.
Yeah.
All of those tests that are being done still have a driver, in inverted commas, in the driver's seat, but they don't touch anything. They sit there in case they need it.
Crash an autonomous vehicle, might as well give your house, because it's going to cost you a mint, isn't it?
It may well do, or it might cost the company that made the car a mint.
Yeah, who's going to take the blame though?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, that's it too. What about autonomous trucks?
Yeah, I think autonomous trucks,
Oh, that's
they'll be
not-
here before autonomous cars.
You reckon?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, subject for another day. Matty Dickerson.
Breakfast is Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk, Tech Talk with Matthew Dixon.